My name is Natalie Morrison, and I'm 27 years old. The dinner was supposed to be about my brother Daniel. His promotion to regional director at Harman and Wells Consulting had been the only topic in our family group chat for 3 weeks straight. Mom had booked the private dining room at Rosewood Grand, the kind of restaurant where the napkins are folded into swans and the bread basket costs more than your electric bill. 19 people. Aunts, uncles, cousins, family friends, neighbors who had known us since we were kids on bikes in the driveway. Everyone dressed up. Everyone smiling. Everyone there for Daniel. I sat at the far end of the table, near the window, which had always been my spot at family gatherings, close enough to participate, far enough to escape notice. I wore a pale lavender blazer I had bought 2 weeks earlier when I had finally received my first consulting payment from a private client. It was small. Nobody knew about it. But I had stood in that store dressing room and told myself that one day I would wear it somewhere that mattered. I thought that night it would just be background noise for someone else's celebration. I did not know how wrong I was about which part. Dinner started beautifully. The wine was poured, the appetizers came out, and Daniel stood up to say something humble and gracious, while everyone clinked glasses and laughed at the right moments. I genuinely clapped. Whatever complicated history existed between Daniel and me, I had never wanted him to fail. I just wanted someone, at least once, to notice that I had not failed either. I had built something quiet and real over the past 2 years, a small independent consultancy focused on operational restructuring for mid-sized businesses. No fanfare. No family announcement. Mostly because every time I had tried to share something about my work at these dinners, the conversation shifted before I finished my sentence. It was during the second round of toasts when it happened. Uncle Patrick had just finished his speech praising Daniel's work ethic, and the table was still warm with applause when my mother turned toward me with that particular smile she saved for moments like this. The smile that looked kind from across the room but carried something sharp underneath it. She raised her glass slightly, almost casually, and said loud enough for the entire table to hear, all 19 of them, "Maybe one day you'll matter to this family too, Natalie." She said it like a joke. She delivered it like a punchline. And the table treated it like one. My sister Rachel laughed first. Not cruelly, maybe, but she laughed. My father did not laugh. He smirked, which was somehow worse. A few of the cousins looked down at their plates. The family friends shifted in their seats. And I sat there in my lavender blazer with my hands folded in my lap, and I did not cry, which surprised even me. Something in my chest went very still and very cold, the way water goes calm right before it freezes solid. I had heard versions of this my whole life. The comparisons. The gentle dismissals dressed up as concern. The way my choices, the risk, the independence, the refusal to take the comfortable corporate path Daniel had taken, were treated as evidence of confusion rather than conviction. But hearing it said out loud, in that room, in front of 19 people who would remember it, was different. It landed somewhere deeper than the usual comments reached. I picked up my glass and took a slow sip and looked out the window at the street below, where a couple was walking a golden retriever and the city was completely indifferent to what had just happened to me inside this room. I told myself to breathe. I told myself it did not matter. I was still telling myself that when the door to the private dining room opened and a man in a dark navy suit walked in, paused at the entrance, scanned the table with calm, deliberate eyes, and looked directly at me. He was not looking for Daniel. He introduced himself to the room with a brief nod. Marcus Hale, CEO of Meridian Group. And he said, with the entire table listening in absolute silence, that he needed to find Natalie Morrison because he needed her signature on a contract before midnight. The silence that followed Marcus Hale's words was the kind that fills a room completely, the kind where you can hear the candles burning. 19 people turned from him to me in almost perfect unison, and I watched my mother's smile dissolve so slowly it was almost beautiful. My father set his fork down. Rachel stopped mid-sip. Daniel, whose promotion dinner this was supposed to be, looked at Marcus Hale with the expression of a man who had just realized the spotlight had quietly walked across the room and positioned itself over someone else entirely. I stood up from my chair at the far end of the table, the window seat, the background seat, the seat I had accepted without argument for as long as I could remember, and I straightened my lavender blazer. And I walked toward the door with my chin level and my hands completely steady. Marcus Hale extended his hand and shook mine firmly. He said he was sorry for interrupting the dinner. He did not look particularly sorry. He looked like a man who was accustomed to interrupting things that needed interrupting. We stepped into the hallway outside the private dining room, and he explained quickly and without unnecessary drama. Meridian Group was finalizing the acquisition of a mid-sized logistics firm called Castleford Operations. The deal had been stalled for 4 months because Castleford's internal structure was a quiet disaster, redundant departments, overlapping contracts, a compensation architecture that made no financial sense. 3 senior consultants from 2 different firms had attempted restructuring proposals and walked away. Someone on Marcus Hale's internal team had come across a case study I had published 6 months earlier on operational restructuring for distressed mid-sized businesses. They had read it once. Then they had read it again. Then Marcus had read it himself on a flight back from London, and he said he had put the report down somewhere over the Atlantic and thought, "This person understands exactly what we are looking at." His team had spent 2 weeks locating me. 2 weeks. Not because I was hidden, but because I operated quietly, without a large website or a publicist or a LinkedIn profile designed to impress strangers. I had built my work on referrals and results and a small portfolio of clients who did not talk loudly about what I had fixed for them because the fixing itself had been confidential. Marcus said his team had eventually reached one of my previous clients, a manufacturing firm out of Cincinnati, and that client had said 4 words that apparently ended the search immediately. He told me exactly what those 4 words were, and I will carry them for the rest of my life. She does not fail. The contract he needed my signature on that night was a formal engagement agreement. Meridian wanted me as the lead restructuring consultant on the Castleford acquisition. The scope was significant. The timeline was aggressive. The compensation figure he mentioned in that hallway, in a voice as calm as if you were reading a weather report, was more than my parents had collectively believed I was capable of earning in 3 years. He needed the signature that night because the acquisition window closed in 72 hours and his legal team was already on standby. I read every line of that contract in the hallway of the Rosewood Grand while Marcus Hale waited without impatience and the faint sounds of my brother's promotion dinner continued behind the closed door. I had a pen in my blazer pocket. I always carried one, an old habit from my early days. When I attended every meeting slightly overprepared because I could not yet afford to be anything else. I signed on the indicated line and handed it back. Marcus shook my hand again and said his team would be in touch first thing in the morning. Then he thanked me for my time, apologized again for the interruption with that same unapologetic expression, and walked toward the elevator. I stood in the hallway alone for a moment. The carpet was thick and gold-toned under the hallway lights. The city hummed somewhere far below. I breathed in once, slowly, and I thought about every dinner I had ever sat through quietly. Every comment I had absorbed without answering. Every time I had been placed at the far end of the table and accepted it. Then I opened the door and walked back into the room. Every face turned toward me. My mother was watching with an expression I had genuinely never seen on her before, something uncertain, something that did not know yet what posture to take. My father had both hands flat on the table. Daniel looked at me with something I can only describe as recalibration, like a man quietly updating a long-held assumption. Rachel had put her wine glass down entirely. I walked back to my seat at the window. I sat down. I picked up my fork. And in the silence that still had not fully recovered, my Aunt Carol, who had never once commented on my career in any direction, leaned forward from 3 seats away and asked, quietly and sincerely, what exactly it was that I did for work. I smiled. Not a small smile. A real one. And I told her. I told all of them. For the first time, at a family dinner with 19 people listening, I told them about the work I had built from a single laptop and a stubborn refusal to believe that quiet effort was the same thing as failure. I told them about the clients I had helped stabilize, the structures I had untangled, the businesses that were still running because someone had been willing to sit with their most complicated problems and work through them without flinching. I did not perform it. I did not make it dramatic. I just told the truth about my life clearly and without apology, the way I should have done years earlier but had not yet found the ground to stand on. My mother did not apologize that night. I did not expect her to. Apologies like that take longer than a dinner to arrive, and sometimes they never come at all. But something shifted in that room that could not be unshifted, something in the way she looked at me before we left, when she touched my arm briefly in the parking lot and said nothing and did not need to. The Castleford engagement took 11 weeks. It was the hardest and most precise work I had ever done. Meridian closed the acquisition on schedule. Marcus Hale sent a one-line message when it was finished, exactly what I expected, and better. Within 4 months, 2 more referrals came through his network. My business, which had never been loud, became something I no longer needed to explain at family dinners because people had started asking about it before I had the chance. I still sit near the window when I visit home. Old habits have a weight to them that does not disappear overnight. But I no longer sit there because I have accepted being background. I sit there because I like the light, and because I have learned the difference between humility and erasure, and because I know now with complete certainty that the people who are not looking for you in a room are not the ones whose attention defines you. Someone else is always walking through the door. And sometimes, if you have done the work quietly and honestly and without waiting for permission, they are walking through it looking for you.